I believed that if I followed the rules, if I stayed home, homeschooled my kids, stretched every dollar, and gave everything I had, then life would work out. But it didn't. We had degrees, and we were still broke. Still on Medicaid, still in debt, still using food stamps. Someone once told me that I was the hardest working broke person they had ever met. And they were right. Because doing everything right doesn't guarantee freedom. Not when your finances, mindset, and theology are all tangled up. I didn't know it at the time, but freedom isn't something you drift into. You decide your way there, one step at a time. And for me, that journey began with 4 things: knowledge, hope, vision, and discipline. Welcome to A Cup of Hope, the podcast where we talk about life, money, and finding beauty in the broken. I'm your host, Sherry Lynn, a life and money coach, grace-filled guide, and fellow traveler on the road to peace, purpose, and freedom. Today kicks off our July series on freedom and what it really costs. Just a heads up, this episode is a few minutes longer than usual, but it lays the foundation for the entire series, so I hope you'll stick with me to the end. Over the next 5 episodes, we'll explore what true financial freedom looks like and how to start planning now for a peaceful, purposeful, and debt-free Christmas. I'll be sharing stories, real-life coaching moments, and next week, a fun surprise resource to help you take action. So grab your favorite mug, take a deep breath, and let's talk about the price of freedom and why it's so worth the journey. We talk a lot about freedom in the month of July, but we rarely see what it costs. Not just political freedom or independence, but also personal freedom, emotional freedom, spiritual freedom, financial freedom. We wave the flags, light the fireworks, and thank God for liberty. But for so many of us, it doesn't feel like we're truly free. We're stuck in survival mode. We're afraid of looking at our numbers. We're still carrying emotional wounds or spiritual confusion from a past that told us to sit down, be quiet, just try harder. And if we're honest, many of us were never taught what financial freedom actually looks like or how to get there. I know I wasn't. I worked hard, I stretched every dollar, homeschooled 6 kids, and I knew how to balance a checkbook, but I didn't have a financial education. Not just the facts like how insurance works or how to calculate a net worth, but the deeper stuff. The money messages I absorbed growing up, the emotional wiring around spending, guilt, and scarcity. The software, as Harv Eker calls it, that was installed long before I ever wrote my first budget. Rachel Cruze calls this your money classroom. And let me tell you, I had to unlearn a lot before I could rebuild. What I've discovered, both in my own story and in coaching, is that true financial freedom is built on 4 things. Knowledge, not just the facts, but awareness in your patterns, beliefs, and mindset. Hope, the belief that something better is actually possible. Vision, the clarity to see a different future. And discipline, the courage to keep walking even when it's brutally difficult. You don't drift into freedom, you decide your way there, one aligned step at a time. In this episode, I want to walk you through each of these pillars, through my story, and maybe yours too. I want to ask you, what does freedom mean to you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? If you close your eyes right now, what do you see? You see, financial freedom isn't just about numbers. It's about peace, purpose, and alignment with God, your values, and the life you're called to live. And it all starts with a solid foundation. For a long time, I thought being broke just meant I needed to try harder and be patient. I didn't grow up learning about how money works. I didn't really understand interest or budgeting or sinking funds. I didn't know how to build wealth or even how to stop living paycheck to paycheck. To be honest, I didn't know what the Bible had to say about money either, besides tithing. And even that, I didn't really learn until I got to college. Sure, I knew Bible stories. I could have told you about Noah's Ark and Jonah's fish, but I didn't know how those stories connected to my real life. So when it came to money, I was biblically illiterate and financially untrained. Nobody ever talked about Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. Or Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. I didn't realize that God's heart for us is freedom, not just spiritually, but emotionally, relationally, and yes, even financially. He doesn't want us buried in debt, afraid of bills, or anxious about the future. He invites us into a life of stewardship, peace, and purpose, where our money aligns with our values and our identity in Him. But here's the thing. Freedom starts with awareness, with knowledge, not just about the numbers, but about the beliefs and patterns that shaped how we handle money in the first place. Rachel Cruze calls this your money classroom, the unspoken lessons you picked up at home. Was money a source of stress or silence? Did you hear messages like, we can't afford it, or you don't talk about money? Were you taught that debt is normal, or that God will always provide, even if you weren't a good steward? And Harv Eker says it like this, your income can only grow to the extent that you do. Because we all have money software. Those are the beliefs that were installed long before we ever made our own choices. For me, I had to unlearn guilt, scarcity, and spiritualized self-neglect before I could start walking in freedom. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. But it started when I stopped hiding from what I didn't know and started getting curious. Curious about what the Bible says. Curious about how other people got ahead. Curious about whether I could think and live differently. And that first step changed everything. But knowledge is just the beginning. Because once you know what's broken, you need something more to begin dreaming about what could be. And that brings us to our next pillar, hope. Once I began to see the gaps in what I knew about money, scripture, and myself, I honestly felt overwhelmed. It was like the fog was starting to lift, but all I could see was how far I had to go. I knew I couldn't keep doing what I had been doing, but I didn't yet know how to move forward. Despite being married, I felt the emotional burden of trying to hold everything together. And even though I was starting to ask better questions, it would take time before I believed a different answer was possible. One day, one of my coaches said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Sherry, you are the hardest working broke person I've ever met." It wasn't said with judgment, it was said with clarity, and it planted a seed. Because effort isn't always enough when you're operating from broken systems and broken beliefs. But I didn't change overnight. That seed of awareness began to grow quietly beneath the surface over the next several months, especially after I became a single mom. I started listening to The Ramsey Show, and I heard women like me calling in, sharing their stories, doing their debt-free screams, and hearing Dave speak life and encouragement over them. I found myself wondering, can I really do this? How would I even begin? I remember thinking that giving up my few little splurges, less than $20 a month on small things that brought me a little bit of joy, couldn't possibly make a dent in the $40,000+ I owed. All I could see was what I didn't have. I couldn't imagine a way out that didn't feel like more punishment. But then something changed. A friend recommended me for a summer job at our church camp as the overnight director. I didn't even know if I had what it would take to do the job. I was tired and worn down. But the woman who hired me said something I'll never forget. "I've learned that sometimes we hire someone who needs us more than we need them." And in that moment, her belief in me helped me believe in myself again. That summer was exhausting and healing. It reminded me that I wasn't done yet, that maybe I could try, that maybe God did have more for me. And that tiny flicker of belief, that was hope. Hope doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers. What if it doesn't have to be this way forever? That's where my journey toward financial freedom really began. Not with a perfectly balanced budget, but with the belief that maybe my story wasn't over. And once I had that spark of hope, I needed a new picture of what my future could look like. I needed vision. When people talk about vision, it can sound so big and shiny. But for me, vision didn't start with clarity. It started with desperation. Psalm 119 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Not a spotlight, not a lightning bolt, just enough light to take that next step. That is how I felt. That summer, while I was working at camp, exhausted but showing up, something began to flicker. I still felt like I was in survival mode. We were still in a precarious place financially. There was no cushion, no backup plan. But through that job, through those early steps of obedience, I saw God showing up. Some long-needed house repairs were finally getting done in ways I could never have orchestrated. These are things I had been praying over for years. I didn't have a long-term plan, but I began to believe maybe I could take small steps toward stability. I saw the potential to reduce my insurance bills if I could just finish the next round of projects. I started paying attention to what needed to change so that I could gain just a little more margin. And more than anything, I started sensing that time was moving fast. My 3 youngest kids were still at home, and I could feel that window closing. I didn't want to waste it. I didn't want to spend those years just surviving. I wanted peace and purpose. And even though I couldn't see far ahead, I started to feel a faint pull in the right direction. That's what vision looked like in that season for me. It wasn't a polished Pinterest board or a 10-step plan. It was messy, uncertain, but it was movement. It was a sense that by God's grace, I was finally starting to walk towards something better. But vision alone doesn't create change. It takes discipline. The gritty, faithful, often unseen work that no one applauds, but that builds the life you're praying for. While vision may point you in the right direction, discipline is how you keep walking when it feels like everything is uphill. And for me, discipline looked like nothing Instagram worthy. It looked like crock-pot freezer meals. It looked like getting up before the sun and going to bed while everyone else was still sitting around the fire pit chatting. Working 70 to 80 hours a week across multiple jobs. It looked like saying no to things I wanted to say yes to, like going on my kids' quiz trips. Those trips weren't even expensive. We usually only had to cover a few meals, but saying yes, that meant saying no to weekend work, and I couldn't afford that. I didn't visit family. I skipped events. I left parties early to go work. Not because I didn't want to be there, but because I was rebuilding my life. And I had friends who got it and cheered me on, and others who didn't. They thought I was pushing too hard. But what they didn't see was the moment my van blew its engine, and I had no savings, no credit, no way to get credit, and no way to fix it. What they didn't see was my very young adult son buying me a car and saying, "Pay me when you can, Mom." That's hard. Being broke is hard. And if you're there right now, my friend, I see you. What I learned is that the right kind of hard leads to healing. Not overnight, not without tears, but step by step. The world says you have to hustle your way out, but I've learned it takes more than hustle. It takes obedience, surrender, persistence, discernment, and above all, grace. Because discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up faithfully, even when no one sees. Somewhere along the way, my language began to shift. It stopped being, "I can't," or "I have to," and it started becoming, "I'm choosing this." And inside I was thinking, because I believe in what's coming. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving a never-ending cycle of sacrifice and struggle. I was hitting milestones, making progress, rebuilding, not just my finances, but my life. And as I coach now, looking back on that season, I see even more clearly. Yes, it was hard, very hard. And also, there were so many opportunities I couldn't see back then. Because money is more than a math problem. It's emotional. It's spiritual. And for me, it was deeply tangled in bad theology and belief systems I carried about my role and my responsibilities as a woman. Untangling those threads was part of the healing, and it's part of what made space for real freedom. And if you're listening to this right now thinking, "I want freedom too, but I'm so tired," let me offer you a moment to just pause, because this next part is for you. Friend, I don't know where today finds you. Maybe you're tired of fighting so hard with so little return. Maybe you've just started the journey, but the progress feels slow. Or maybe you're waking up to the fact that you've been carrying beliefs that were never true, but they've been shaping your whole life. Wherever you are, I want to invite you to slow down for just a moment. Ask yourself, what does freedom look like for you? If you close your eyes, what do you see? What do you feel? Where do you feel stuck? And where might you shift from I can't to I'm choosing? What belief about money, responsibility, or your role as a woman might be holding you back from peace? Just pick one. You don't have to fix everything this week, but awareness and knowledge is where freedom begins. And one small, grace-filled choice in the right direction, that's how you start to build a life of peace, purpose, and freedom. Friend, if this episode stirred something in you, if you're feeling stuck with your money, unsure where it's all going, or just tired of trying to do it alone, I want to invite you to something that could be a turning point. It's a free one-to-one money Q&A session with me. This is a safe, grace-filled space to talk through your biggest money questions, whether budgeting, debt, overspending, or just that nagging feeling that you should be further along by now. Together, we'll talk about what you really want your money to do for you, what's getting in the way, both practically and emotionally, and one aligned next step you can take toward freedom. No pressure, just real conversation, real clarity, and real hope. Just click the link in the show notes to grab your free spot. I'd love to sit with you and help you take that next step. And remember, God can take the broken pieces of your story and create something more beautiful than you ever imagined. Until next time, I'm Sherry Lynn, and this is A Cup of Hope.